Okay, so what are we saying? If we do Madaya first because it was first, consider everything your expansion has to offer. Aesthetic, new areas to grind, new content types that it added, size of region, you could argue the big is good, small is good, whatever you want. Any new gear, anything really new. So let's talk Madaya. How do you guys feel about Madaya? I feel like it was so early as an expansion area, and many of you in the chat probably wouldn't even play in the game because you'd have to have played from launch. It was like a month after launch that they added Madaya. But you might still kind of have memories of when Madaya was in the most current stage of its life cycle, which was still quite late. Like even Valencia being added, it didn't change much. Madaya is controversially a D. Ooh, people are rose tinted. I'd say A only because Salzin meta. That's true. So with Madaya, we have Salzin meta, which is where there was lots of PvP around Salzins. Is that enough to make it an S tier though? I mean, you could also make the opposite argument that because there was so little areas to grind, you were literally constantly in competition for a grind spot. And that wasn't always PvP. Like, sometimes you were just getting grief and there was nothing you could do about it.
These nights.
Legendary, thank you so much for the 73 months of resub, man. I appreciate that. Let's hang on. Okay. Let me, Oh, apparently that closed it. Hang on. Well, there's no point being on Arsh anymore. Thank you, Legendary. Madaya is small and didn't really add many areas, and the original questline sucked. I mean, questline is definitely something we need to consider when talking about these different regions being added. So keep in mind also, we're talking about the state of the region when it was first added, not how it is now. Although there'll be some caveats to that, where like we could maybe allow for things like the Orzeka to count. Okay, so if we're gonna rank Madaya, things to consider: Salzin's PvP was great, but also Salzin's griefing by people that didn't PvP, that just griefed you, was not so great. So I don't know, man, because I think that the Madaya update did add things like Grunel, which was new gear to go for. That was kind of nice. I don't know. Madaya is difficult. Because I also, aesthetically, I hate Madaya. I think it's the ugliest region out of every single region. So if it was going off of, like, aesthetic, Madaya would be, like, who cares? Like, it's so bad. But it had some positive aspects. Do you have... Hey, Anders. Do you have Arctic Fox Pet? Yeah, I have it. But I'm not Anders. Madaya did add the Schultz set. I mean, Scarla was completely forgettable. Ancient Guardians. It was a big update for its time. The questline is bad in Madaya, though. Yeah, Salzin's PvP was great, but like I said, it's kind of offset by the fact that because Salzin's was so good, it was also, like, incredibly hard griefed. Like, the griefing back then was next level, nothing compared to what we have now. Madaya was also the release of our ability to go push past 50 into 56. You would say C. I'm trying not to, like, disparage it too much because I hate Madaya's appearance. I hate PvPing in Madaya. Madaya Castle sucks. I'm gonna put Madaya at a B. I think... I think it did add some nice things to the game. Pirates were also sort of introduced with Madaya before we got Valencia, if I remember correctly. But that's how I'm going to put it. Valencia gets a fat... Who cares? Wow, that is such an extreme take. Okay, let's talk Valencia then. Okay, Valencia. I know where I put Valencia. It's S tier for me. Undisputably S tier. It's the biggest expansion we've ever gotten. Size-wise, the map is huge, believable. You can get lost and feel like you're actually adventuring. I love it. I loved the things that mattered at the time, like the desert debuff and the traveling and getting a camel. You know, you also added the baby elephant. You added the guild siege elephants at the time. They weren't in the game before. It was the first expansion that added pen, so no longer was it like you were stuck at plus 15. Which you could argue was a bad thing, but I think was natural progression for the game at the point because 15 was easy to get. I mean, the new accessories, you got new BIS accessories that were like, they didn't devalue what you had so much as they were just a little bit better and therefore worth getting. The only downside to Valencia was that it wasn't good enough to grind at the release, which sucked. But I loved it. Also had Ackman and Histria. I remember groups of 5 people grinding Ackman for what we solo grind now. But like, you know, back then, groups of 5 people. And then there was this like rumors of the Tongrad earring, which used to be called Tongrade earring on EU and NA. It was, I don't know if it was ever a misspell or whatever. So that was always mysterious. And the fact that Valencia, or like Histria would just shit on you. Muquin, you had like the... Yeah, I think it added too much in the game to be anything other than S. And also, one thing that Valencia had going for it that isn't really fair on the other regions, but is just a fact of it. When we got Valencia, it was before the information sharing from Korea was at the rate that it is now, which often spoils new expansions. Valencia was so new and fresh because we didn't really know that much from Korea. So, yeah, it's gotta be S, man. It's gotta be S. Right. Next up came Camas Sylvia. I'm interested in what you guys feel about Camas. I was really excited for Camas Sylvia. I'll just say that. Because an elven forest... I was just like, oh my god, this is gonna be insane. When it got released, there was a lot of cool things. So, some things that you might have forgotten about. This was the first introduction of the Griffin Helmet. And the Griffin Helmet you could actually technically actively grind via killing the Griffins in the Navaran Steppe, which was kind of interesting. It added the Bon, Wan, and Jin crystals. And at the time when it was first added, it was a hell of a grind because you couldn't easily get Forest Furies at the time. It was released in 2 parts, so you have to weigh them both together at their time. So Camas Part 1 was interesting, Murmak was impossible to grind at the time, it was way too hard. Manshams was really hard, but a duo grind spot, and I really missed that version of Manshams. Looks-wise, Camas is S tier, one of the best looking regions. See, I'm gonna say no. I think that Old Wisdom Tree is kind of cool. And I think Grana is nice, but I think Camas Sylvia gets a fat L because they didn't really go that ham to make it look magical like they think they were going for it, but they didn't do it for me. I think the region could have looked way better. I think it was really disappointing, but I guess that maybe that's just my take. That's not everybody else's take. Gyfin also, 5-man Gyfin, original 5-man Gyfin was also amazing. So that's a big positive for me. I think Camas Sylvia is an A. Camas Sylvia is an A for me. Is that fair? I don't think it's an S tier region. I don't think it was big enough. I don't think, like, it had to be released in 2 parts. You know, like, if you consider that it was very small at the start, and even now it's not that big. Aesthetics are a divisive thing. I don't think they did enough to make it look like a magical forest. It looked like too open, and I don't know. I think A is fair for Camas Sylvia. Right, so next up we have Drigan. Now, Drigan doesn't get the infinite potions counted here. It wasn't released with infinite potions. They came way later, and infinite potions are shared with Camas Sylvia, which we didn't count for Camas Sylvia. So no infinite potions. For me, I think who cares? Yeah, I think it's so difficult to argue positives for Drigan. I think there's some good-looking landscapes to Drigan. I love Garmoth's Nest aesthetically. That's cool. I think Bloodwolves looks cool. Sure, Ruins looks pretty cool. But the thing is, they added these low-tier grind spots to a new region, and it was like people that had gear were like, "What the fuck is the point?" And even players that didn't have gear didn't grind there because there were better grind spots elsewhere. So it was like, it literally was who cares. So it's a B for you. That's really high, Scatha. Wow. That's really high. Because keep in mind, we didn't even really get the Lacairo plants, so the Manos update wasn't actually tied to it. And then we did get the Lacairo plants, we still didn't get Manos for way later. Adventurer's Tome... Yeah, but the questing wasn't really updated to take advantage of that till way later. Whom crystals? Whom's Macalaws, they're kind of okay, I guess. Yeah, I think that Garmoth alone isn't a good enough reason. And I could even argue that Garmoth was bad because it added a drop that was so rare, rarer than even Vel, that was so necessary. And it wasn't... Garmoth has never been a fun fight, in my opinion. So, I'm sorry, I think it has to be who cares. Despite Scatha trying to rescue it, I think it has to be who cares. One thing we haven't considered is music. But I don't know if anyone's familiar enough with the music, so... Changing my rating to C. Okay, okay. I mean, if that's your favorite region, that's fine, Scatha. For me, I can't argue for it. I think the problem was Drigan was also a very big gap between the Korean release and our release. At those times the gaps were big, and what also annoyed me was like South America, which was like, you know, a year younger than our server, caught up to us and got Drigan at the same time as us, while Korea arbitrarily stayed really far ahead. So Duvenkroon isn't a bad looking city. I don't know, it's okay. Yeah, I feel like Drigan was the perfect expansion, if not the Mountain of Eternal Wind, to add a cool dwarven city and built into a mountain, but it wasn't. So yeah, I can't. I have like a VOD of Drigan's release, and it just was so unhype. It was so sad. Right. So Odalita. Let's talk Odalita. Orzeka is okay to count here. I know it came a little bit later, but I think that because it's so exclusively Odalita, except for the Ash Forest grind. I think that it's okay to count Orzeka here. Whereas the Infinite Potions is shared between Drigan and Kama and came so much later. So Odalita, the biggest downfall for Odalita for me was the lack of Thornwood Castle. It still exists this day, still not being used. The 10v10 crew mode, also not being used. So, that's unlucky. But for me, Odalita is an S-tier looking expansion. Aesthetics is insane. I think that the music soundtracks in Odalita are great as well. Odraxia is one of the coolest capital cities in the game, which is also another point for Valencia. I think Valencia City is really nice. Odie is like a C. Okay. Why do you think Odalita is a C? Because I would definitely rank it higher than C. I think also the grind spots were more relevant, so maybe not initially at the time, But Olin's didn't take too long to come online, and although Crypt is kind of coming online later, it's still kind of an awesome grind spot. I don't care if they add a grind spot to every new region that is literally unplayable at the time, but eventually we'll be able to do it. I think that's so motivating and so cool and mysterious, like Histria was in Valencia. I think Turos was a cool grind spot. Aesthetically, the mobs were cool. The drop list was unique. Odalita also added the unique immortal elixir kind of thing, or was it immortals, or is it the hour? I can't remember which one it is. I can't remember that silver unicorn, to be honest with you. You feel like it added nothing at the time? I mean, it added Fallen God. What do you mean it added nothing? Odalita added the most important progression other than Caphras since Valencia, which is Fallen God. I mean, it was huge. The idea of grinding for an upgrade past your dim tree, and at the time people weren't running around with C20s and things like that. Having C10 was quite an achievement, and so it was like, for those, it was very motivating knowing that was coming too, because you knew you had to get that in time. You hated the no-go grinding spots. Well, the only one that was no-go was Crypt, right? I think like Thornwood was quite good for an early grind spot. Most people could grind Thornwood, and it was decent, And I think that Turos was grindable if you had the gear and progress. I like that compared to Dregan, the thing they corrected was they made it so that it had motivations for geared players, right? Because Dregan was just all F tier one-shot grind spots. Even, I mean, Shuriken's was a joke, right? Olin's, it didn't take long for people to grind Olin's. It didn't take long for grind Olin's. Olin's was an achievable goal, and people figured out how mechanically Olin's worked, and then it was all smooth sailing, which was actually more of an important thing. Olin's hasn't changed, as far as I can remember, in terms of damage or mechanics. It's only the loot has been improved a little bit with Caphras. It hasn't mechanically changed, and we now know we can grind Olin's with, like, hilariously low gear, like seasonal gear with Shies, right? Like, you can grind Olin's with pretty low gear. So it was more of mechanics, learning mechanics. I think for me, Odalita is an A, almost S. I think it's almost an S for me, but I think A is probably fairer. I think Odalita could have been bigger. I think the fact that they never implemented the Thornwood Castle PvP mode and still haven't to this day is pathetic on Pearl Abyss's part. But music, aesthetic, capital city, it was so cool. And then obviously Fallen God. Right. Our final one, I would rank it at A, higher than Camas. I mean, this is, I haven't really like changed that, but yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I think it was better than Camas in some ways. It's close though, because Camas Sylvia had 5-man Gyphon grinding and a lot of other cool stuff added to the game. But I think Odalita for me is just better looking. Some people really like, as we've seen, the Camas Sylvia aesthetic, but for me it's like, it's too mid. I think they didn't go hard enough with the magical aspect of the forest, Like, I wanted something that looked like Teldrassil or Ashenvale from WoW kind of thing, like really sell me on the elven magic and the mystique and things. Anyway, alright, so Mountain of Eternal Winter. This one, best soundtrack, in my opinion, from any expansion. What do you guys think? Aesthetically, I love it. I think it looks great. Jade is one of the best looking grind spots in the game. I think the snow is done really well compared to like the seasonal snow events. Labreska helmet is a plus. The quest line is clearly the best quest line of any of these regions. That's just indisputable. They buffed Jade Forest with Agris. It's pretty good now. The new quest line was really good, I think. This is going to be a hot take, but I think they should have made Mountain of Eternal Winter not available as an option for a starting zone for new players. Because I think that it's a region that they could have made harsh and difficult to get to like Valencia. It could have been something you worked towards. However, they missed a lot of notes, like Randy's saying. It's way too small. It's the smallest region. How has that happened? You can... I mean, they can even add dead space, and that would be really good, because it would make it, like, the size of the region is what makes it believable. If you're going into a different biome, you want to feel like it's a whole new area, not like little micro biomes that all, for some reason, have different weather. It makes no sense. Pillars grinding is a horrific... Like, unlike Odalita, which you could argue every single grind spot is good, and Camas Sylvia these days, but wasn't at the start, Mount of Eternal Winter, that pillar grind spot is so useless. Why it exists, I don't know. It's literally try and get knowledge there. Yeah, so the Shies being able to set campfires and the Guardians being immune to hypothermia, just, I don't know if that's a thing, because you can get hypothermia, but only when you climb to the top of the Mountain of Eternal Winter, which, by the way, is like a stroll. Like, they should have just gone ham with that. I mean, they should have really just gone, like, holy shit, this is, like, the biggest thing we'll ever build mountain-wise. It's, like, you know, way up there, you know. Instead, it was, like, meh. So, that was kind of sad. Murawak. Economically, Murawak kind of sucks. Just kind of sucks. But I think that as a new design for a grind spot, it's S tier. Like, it's incredible. The whole idea that you can look on your minimap, see white dots, and actually be pleased is, like, revolutionary for BDO, where usually you're like, wow, there's people on my minimap. That sucks. You know? So I really like that. So for me, Mount of Eternal Winter, I think is a B. Which feels harsh because I almost want to put it at A, because the quest line is amazing. Aesthetically, it's amazing. Labreska helmet, pretty cool. We needed that. I think that's nice to have that. Murawak was really cool, but it's just not enough. It's just not big enough. Content-wise, it's just too small. We could have gotten a new outfit, like Odalita getting Orzeka. Yes, it was a little bit after Odalita was released, so we had Orzeka, but still, it wasn't that long. I think B is harsh, but I think it's a better B than Madaya. Because they're similar sizes to each other, and I like looking at Mount of Eternal Winter, whereas Madaya is like, meh. I love how we don't have a C or a D, we just have who cares as Drigan. I mean, we could do this list again and be really harsh and make sure we have at least one of these filled, but it's hard to do that. Maybe Madaya is C, but... Does anybody feel very strongly against this list? Star's End is Calpheon, so no. Garmoth was wild when it first came out. That's not enough to save Drigan. Garmoth is an annoying fight. Nobody likes doing Garmoth. Madaya as a B feels really generous. Wow, are we gonna drop Madaya to C? Is Soundals enough? Even with the against the griefing, with the PvP being so fun, is that enough to drop it to a C? You do get the broom sweeping emote from Drigan. That's nice. I do like that. You think Mount of Eternal Winter should be dropped to a C? I think that's harsh. I think it's a solid B. Everything that they did in Mount of Eternal Winter, aside from the pillars where you invest energy, which is like, why is that a thing, is basically almost an S tier or close. And the only thing they downgraded was the fact that it just wasn't enough of stuff. It just was too small. I remember I couldn't wait to get into Valencia though. Like, even though we had pirates and also still Salzans was good, I grinded Valencia and I grinded Basilisk in spite of that because I loved Valencia so much. So I couldn't wait to get out Madaya. That's true, Mount of Eternal Winter might have 2 parts. Or it's supposed to. In the lore, spoiler alert, there is like the other side of the mountain, which has different abets. So. Okay, all right. I feel like Madaya is going to be moved to a C. I think there's a lot of nostalgia with Salzans that kind of saves it, but it was kind of like it was just mid. It didn't add any Giga accessories that you could really progress. Like I said, there was the Schultz stuff that wasn't that great. I'm happy with this. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Let's save this. I'll put it in